Hello and welcome again to What If Natives Won, a video blog and channel about alternate history and American Indians, Native Americans, indigenous peoples. This is the 17th video of 28 planned ones. My name is Carroll. I'm an Associate Professor of History at Northern Virginia Community College. I've written mostly about wars, veterans, human rights, and genocide. I'm also, together with Rob Schmidt of Blue Corn Comics, editing and putting out a short story collection, What If Natives Won. This is what this video blog and channel are about. There's a huge lack of alternate history written about American Indians, indigenous people. Many people don't like to think about genocides in America. They likely were never taught about them. Many don't want to be reminded, want to believe these genocides never happened, or it was an accident. I've had great success using alternate history to teach my students, show them absolutely nothing in history was inevitable. It never had to be. The worst of human history is always a conscious choice. How things turn out is based on how evil the evil choose to be, and how well and how strongly good people choose to stand up to them or stop them. The way things turned out in history took a very specific set of circumstances. Sometimes history can turn on very small things. Change even one and you have an entirely different history, different present, different society. It may be hard to hear this, but we live right now in a dystopian world. One of the worst of all possible outcomes for anyone who is not white. America is today 98% non-native. At least 75 million to 112 million natives were killed by not one genocide, but a series of them, the last of them ending only in the year 2000. In America, Brazil, Canada, Guatemala, Argentina, Mexico, Peru, and elsewhere. On top of that is massive genocide denial. This is not taught in almost all American schools. There are racist images everywhere that are often not admitted to be racist. But much of this could change. This time we look at an independent nation from the Amazon region of Brazil. Both Spain and Portugal faced independence movements in their Latin American colonies. In 1807, Napoleon invaded Portugal. A year later, he invaded Spain. Latin America's colonies had been fighting for independence in some places for over 50 years. But with Spain and Portugal occupied fighting France for their home countries, independence became much easier. In Spain, the wars for independence would last over 30 years more. All those colonies eventually became Latin American independent nations, except for Puerto Rico. Some leaders like Bolivar tried to keep the region together as one big nation, but different provinces broke away and split into over a dozen and a half nations. Sometimes they further broke away, as in Central America. This didn't happen in Brazil. In Spain, the king was captured by Napoleon. In Portugal, the emperor and his entire court and government escaped by ship only a few hours before Napoleon's armies. They sailed to Rio, and the empire proclaimed Brazil and Portugal to be equal nations in 1822. Dom Pedro II proclaimed the Empire of Brazil, ruling for over 50 years until forced out by the military. Brazil stayed one nation, while Spain's colonies became over a dozen and a half. Some people insist the Brazilian Empire was stable, but there were many revolts trying to break away at the same time as in Spanish colonies. This map shows where the revolts were and their intended nations. Many of the revolts were from the 1820s to 1840s, similar to Spain's colonies. What if the Prince Regent of Portugal and his court are captured by Napoleon? Brazil has no later monarch to declare independence. It has no emperor to unite its elites of different regions. Traditionally, the saying is Brazil's elites were café com leite, coffee with milk. The coffee-growing elites of Sao Paulo on the left against the dairy cattle elite of Minas Gerais on the right. Without a monarch, these conflicts come sooner. So after fighting off Portuguese troops, Brazil splits into up to 7 nations. Sao Paulo's coffee plantation owners dominate what's left of Brazil. The cattle ranchers dominate most of the northeast nations. What about an Amazon state? Grau-Pará. In our own time, this was the Cabanagum revolt. Cabanagum were the traditional homes of the poor. Grau-Pará was about 120,000 people at the time. About a fourth were natives, another fourth black slaves. Mixed race and mostly very poor people were most of the rest. Whites were only 15,000. In our own time, the revolt began in 1835 with uprisings led by plantation slaves and an army mutiny. After losing 2 leaders, its longest president or commander was Eduardo Angelim. In crushing the rebellion, the national government may have killed up to 1/3 of the people of Graupada. The Malay and Ragamuffin revolts were at the same time, and there was another revolt only a couple of years before. Plus, there was a war with Argentina and Britain. Without a unifying emperor, Brazil could face at least 4 separate wars at once, and most or all succeed. Graupada was the farthest from the population centers of Brazil, the least important economically, the likeliest the national government wouldn't devote much effort to. The states that today make up what used to be Graupada have more than 15 million people. The remnants of Brazil likely still fight a deadly war with Paraguay in a few years, and likely they still have integralist and fascist movements in the 20th century, and likely they still have military dictatorships. Perhaps they are even stronger because Brazil has fewer people who are not white. The good news is Brazil's military dictators have no control over the Amazon unless they decide to invade. There were 2 separate genocides in modern Brazil. The first was during the rubber boom with mass enslavement and massacres. For the second, the military carried out an incredibly brutal, outright genocide against Amazon Indians. This went on from 1950 all the way until 1990. The military, plus miners and cattlemen militias, exterminated 80 tribes with massacres and mass poisonings, killing 800,000. This is a genocide praised by the current would-be dictator with fascist beliefs in Brazil, Bolsonaro. But Graupada has all the Amazon basin except part of the coast, living in a nation with almost all natives, blacks, and mixed race. Both these genocides are prevented. The big exception is in the northern part of the remains of Brazil, the area that today includes the capital, Brasilia. Because some of the Amazon tribes are in both nations, it's almost certain Graupada tries to stop this genocide. Even possible they lead an alliance of the separatist nations that overthrows the dictatorship and crushes fascism in Brazil. A win over genocide and racism in a native and mixed race nation is certainly native victory. This is the end of the 17th video. I look forward to your comments and questions and will answer them as often as I can. But racism, genocide denial, childish behavior, personal attacks get deleted. I do recognize some questions will be asked in ignorance because much of the facts I point to are new to most people. They were never taught about this. They've been raised in denial since denying indigenous genocides is taught in almost all public schools. Next time we will discuss what if the Trail of Tears is stopped. Please repost freely, subscribe, like, share, and comment. I'll post again in about a week. This has been What If Natives 1 video blog and channel.